All right, good afternoon, and thanks for coming to, this is Java deployment for macOS 10. For those of you who are looking at the schedule and wondering, well, there's this talk and there's another one that with a very similar name at 3 o'clock. This session is more of an overview, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper into different ways that you can distribute your a native application on macOS 10. So that's going to be a little bit more detailed than this one, but this is going to give you a good overview of everything that Oracle is doing with Java on the Mac, as far as how it's going to be distributed, how we're taking things over from Apple, and so on and so forth. So just to give you an idea of what the talks are about. So my name is Scott Kovach, and my official title is a consulting member of technical staff, but really what my main job is to be the lead for the macOS 10 port of Java. Right now that means focusing on deployment, which is like web start and applets and getting the plugin and things like that working. But I also have my hands in class for JavaFX, a little bit of Java 2D and the UWT. But I've been associated with Java on the Mac since 1996, back to the days of MetroWorks and System 8. And I was with Apple for about 8 years, and got away, did some wandering around, but then Oracle asked me to come back, and when Oracle decided to take Java back from Apple, I was offered the chance to come back and get it going again, and that's now what I'm doing with Oracle. So that sort of gives you to talk about, tells you who I am. Chris Benson is over here. He's been helping me with the talk for the past couple of weeks. Chris is actually new to Java deployment, and I'm hoping to pass some things along to him about Java on the Mac, and he's got a long experience with the Mac as well. So for those of you wondering about how Oracle is dealing with the Mac, I think they're trying to do the right things. So let's get going, and that gives you a sort of a roadmap where we're going with these talks this afternoon. So, yeah, we got your standard lawyer slide here. Don't rely on anything I'm about to say in a contract, or assume that if I show it to you today, it will ship. You're going to see this a lot this week, so by about Wednesday, nobody will even mention this slide. We'll just go right on. So here's the agenda for today. The theme I want to do for this talk is how it was versus how it's going to be. So as a show of hands, how many of you have been doing Java on macOS 10 in some form for a while? Okay, good. How many of you have been to WWDC? Okay. How many of you have seen me giving a talk at WWDC, at Apple's conference? Oh, not okay. Not as many as I thought. I was going to tell you can go because it's just the same material, but no. So yeah, I've been doing this a little bit updated yearly, but this is going to be a very similar talk to what I've given in the past at Apple's conference. But basically what we're going to focus on here is how things were with Apple was doing it as opposed to what Oracle is going to do, because there's going to be some subtle differences. Then I'll give you a little bit of a tour of what Java 7 on macOS 10 is like, and how you're going to get it, how your users are going to get it. And the main thing I want to focus on is what we're calling native applications. And since many of you are familiar with Java on the Mac, you'll recognize this pretty quickly. But for those of you new to the platform, this is going to be hopefully a new deployment alternative for you on all platforms. But we'll focus on the Mac in this session. And finally, Q&A. All right, so how it was with Java on the Mac was that Apple's been a licensee, and actually still is. But you got it from Apple. As of right now, it's 6 update 35, and they've been doing a pretty good job of tracking the 6 updates. On 10.6, it was pre-installed. On 10.7, it's now an on-demand install. And by on-demand, that basically means that anything that touches Java will prompt the user to install. And if you've been, if you had a Mac for a while, so you probably are familiar with this. When you upgraded to Lion, and Mountain Lion for that matter, anytime you try to do anything with Java, it offers to install Java 6. So one of the big differences between what Apple did and well, Sun and now Oracle has done on other platforms is that Apple has only ever shipped the JDK. When you get an update for Java and software update, you're getting a full JDK, Java C and everything, whether you're a user or developer. As time went on, Apple supported multiple JDKs, and you would manage those through Java preferences.app. So you could, if you're having problems with the new version, you could go into Java preferences, shut it off, and run your Apple with the older version, and so on and so forth. It would also control how, if you're familiar with the JNOP protocol, when you did like 1.6 star or 1.6 plus, on Apple, we would let you define the order in which those things would be evaluated, as opposed to the strict order that was sort of hinted at by the JNOP spec. And the other thing now, which is a newer thing, is that Java preferences.app also turned off Apple's and WebStart. In some cases, automatically, if you haven't run Java in a while. Well, the things that are going to change is that from now on, users, I'm making a very important distinction here, users should get Java 7 from java.com. If you are a developer, you want to go to OTN or oracle.com, and you can see a blue link, so if you get these slides later, you'll be able to get the click on that link and go right to the download for the 7 JDK. When you do install the JDK, we also install JRE for you automatically, as opposed to Windows where it asks you, where do you want to put it and so on. But we just put the latest JRE on there for you to make it easier to develop. Right now, we're at 7U7. And if you'll notice that when 7U7 was released, that came out at the same time on all the platforms. Since 7U6, that's been the case, and we certainly intend to keep that being the case from now and forever. That Mac is now just another platform, so to speak. Your minimum OS is 10.7.4, and I know some people complain about this. I'm still on Snow Leopard, and why can't I run Snow Leopard? And for better or for worse, there were some things that we rely on from Apple that they could only make public in an update like this in 10.7.4. And as a result, there are things that we simply rely on. We needed to have Apple exposed to us in 10.7.4 to get the AWT to work. And so as a result, we have to have 10.7.4. That's unfortunate, but the general philosophy when I was at Apple, and I think we're going to try to keep this going as well on now with Oracle, is that we always support the current OS -1. So Mountain Lion is the current OS, Lion is previous. So we're always going to make our best efforts to support, as in right now, 10.7 and 10.8 as best we can. When 10.9 comes out, I don't know when that's going to be, of course, but you should expect that we would drop whatever was running on 10.7 at that point. Don't take that as gospel, but take that as a point. Java 7 is 64-bit only. This is generally not a problem because all systems today will run 64-bit. The only place it's a problem is if you rely on Chrome, which is 32-bit only. We have no way to support Google Chrome to run applets. Now, if you use Deploy Toolkit, which if you're familiar with that already, you know what I'm talking about, but you'll hear more about later in the week. But Deploy Toolkit is already set up to basically notify the user that you can install Java, but you're on a browser that won't be able to run applets. So we try to make it easy for you to deploy in this environment. Some other things we're going to do that's slightly different, really compared to other platforms, is that there's only ever going to be one active JRE on the system. One of the headaches of deployment, particularly on Windows, is that it's really easy to get a lot of old JREs littering your system. And if those are unsecure VMs, that's a problem. Well, the solution to that is to have only one and keep it up to date. And so that's what we're going to start doing on the Mac. We'd like to see that happen on Windows as well. Can't make that promise, but that's certainly something we want to try to do. As a developer, you can have any number of JDKs. That's mostly true now. I mean, you can install just about any 6U update of the JDK. They can all coexist on your system. But that's something we're always going to support now in 7. Not only is there only one active JRE, but of course only the latest is going to be supported. We are not supporting install on demand right now. We know that there are certain environments where you rely on a certain dot release of the JRE. If you are one of those sites, please let us know, because we're trying to come up with use cases that where we can better support that. But what we are not going to do is have the ability for an arbitrary unsigned applet or JNLP application to just say, hey, I need this really old version of the JRE, would you please go get it and install it? And we're not going to do that on Mac. The other big thing, and I put some green arrows as you see along the way, but if you have built a application with Apple's tools, be it Xcode or Jar Bundler, it will not work with Java 7. The Java tools from Apple rely on some private frameworks that are not being exposed to us, and they have no intention of making them publicly available. So, sort of as a joint decision with us and Apple, we decided that it's time to make a break from the old Java application launcher private frameworks and start new. So if you have something that you deploy with Java 6, you must rebundle it. We're going to talk about that today and in the next session in more detail. But we're making that break, starting with Java 7. So what is the JDK 7? Really, this is actually one of the good things about Oracle taking over this now, is that basically what you got is a Mac OS 10 style bundle with the JDK inside. So if you install the JDK on Windows, and you know what that folder structure and all the libraries look like, it's going to be the same as on the Mac. The difference is that we've got, it's packaged up in a Mac OS 10 bundle, which is basically a folder structure designed to look like one file on your desktop. We're always going to install it to library Java, Java virtual machines. Really no big change there from what Apple was doing, but the one other distinction is that only the JDK is accessible from the command line. And actually, a better way to put that is you can only access the JDK from the command line. We do not intend to support situations where you have a deployment that requires anybody to install JDK. There are situations where you may need tools.jar, but it's okay to bundle that with your application. So there should be, now unless you're writing a developer tool and you want to rely on Java C, that's fine. But we do not want to get in a situation where you're telling your users, you must install the JDK to run my application. So as I mentioned before, the JDK also installs a JRE, and that looks a little bit different on a Mac. So what is that? Well, again, it's just another bundle. But in this case, we're putting in library internet plugins. This was due to, I want to say an unfortunate decision, which we may change in the future, but it works right now. So basically what we do is we wrap up the JRE, make it look like a plugin for the browser, and then we install it in library internet plugins, overriding Apple's plugin for Java 6. And when you do that, now the Mac OS 10 is smart enough to say, oh, Oracle's Java is installed, I'm going to pass everything off to that. So, but basically once you do that, you got something you got a runtime that's used for WebStart, used for applets, double-clickable jars. If you write a native application and you don't include your own JRE, you'll use that as well. But basically, once you install that, it starts to get used for just about anything an end user would run into. once you do that, and also that's the other good part is there's no registration involved like in Windows. So once you get that plugin in there, you're ready to go with any browser that supports NP API. And right now that is Safari 5. Safari 5 and 6. Netscape, Firefox beginning at, I want to say like Firefox 7 or 8. I think we will support back to that version. Something new now is we're going to also install a preference panel. Java preferences, much like on Windows, it's a control panel on Windows, and makes sense to have it in system preferences on Mac as well. So that is where you will end up directing users for, Java preference, the Java control panel, generally speaking, if you have to tell a user to go there, something's really bad with their system. Or they have some special configuration that's unique to you. But from now on, that'll be in system preferences as opposed to standalone app. And there's going to be a transition there, and I'll talk about that towards the end of this talk. So keep that in mind. JRE is not available from the command line. One philosophy we had at Apple, and I'm going to keep it going here as much as I can, is that telling the users to open terminal.app to do anything is a failure on your part as a developer. That's always been the Apple philosophy, and I think it's a good one for users as well. Don't force the users to type Java-jar. We've got lots of options for you for deployment. And to sort of help drive that home, we want to keep the JRE inaccessible from the command line. It will not be possible to download that JRE just with an ordinary install. So if you go get any JDK, and for whatever reason, you get a bug that's like, well, it's only a bug against this version of the JDK. If I can go back and install that old JDK, not overwrite my JRE. I mean, I can take out that the plugin and the JRE so I can duplicate my problem, but you will not accidentally downgrade your runtime just by installing it. Sort of to see this visually, I made this little graphic to show how this is going to work. So here we have library Java virtual machine Java VMs. You can happily install your JDKs. Java 8. You can get Java 8 weekly builds now, and you'll be able to see them populate library Java VMs. And as you notice, we don't overwrite. We'll keep them all unique for you. So if you got some special configuration for development, we're not going to clobber it just because you get a newer JDK. For users, things are a little bit different. So the first time you install the JRE, everything goes into Java applet plugin.plugin. Inside, it's got a certain version of the JRE. You can figure that out if you want, but generally we don't really advertise it. We also get a symlink in library/preference panes. And that links to the Java control panel, which is hidden inside the runtime. When an update comes out, we just slide in a new plugin and everything stays the same. We don't have to redo control panels or anything like that. We're just going to get a new version of Java applet plugin.plugin. You're all good to go. And so on down the line. We can do this forever and a day. Unfortunately, I stopped at 3 versions of the JRE. So, when it comes time to deploy on Mac OS X, well, what can you do? Well, you can do all the standard things, right? You can do applets. We've got web start support now. You're going to hear a in-depth talk on what's new in deploy for Java 7 later this week. And now and for those of you on the Mac for the first time, all of that will be completely relevant to you as well, because all that stuff is going to be supported out of the box. So for applets and web start as well. You can do a jar if you want to. Build a executable jar, double click it. It'll work. But we got some new platform aware choices, native applications. In the Mac OS, when I worked at Apple, we used to call these bundled apps, or bundled Java apps. Now, for just some consistency, we're calling them native applications, just to make them a little bit more distinction. Well, what's that? It's like, now, a lot of people raise their hands here, so I think where you've seen this before. But a bundled native app is, you know what that is. You work with them all the time. It's a kind of hard to see the name down there, but it's name of the application.app. And it's just this one file that the user drags around. And so all the contents of your app stay together. It makes it easier to move it around if you want to. So all applications on the Mac are bundles. And I briefly mentioned, but what is that? It's just a folder hierarchy. And in the Finder, it just looks like one file. It's going to hide out all the support stuff. You can throw in whatever junk you need. Well, junk. Throw in whatever stuff you need to make your application work. Hide it away in the bundle. Users can't accidentally throw something away or say, well, I don't need that. Why do I need that? And break your application. You move it around, copy it. Won't break anything. And here I did a show package contents on TextEdit just to show you what's going on inside. So as you can see, we've got inside that macOS folder, we've got that TextEdit, which is basically the actual binary that's going to be run. And oh yes, I actually have a description. That's metadata, which basically is what tells the Finder the name of the application. If you change the language that you're running, the different language that'll be used, and plus give some information to the system so it can find your application later. The executable, right? As I said, that's like the actual native object code that starts up your app. And then all the localizations, so like all the strings for different languages. You put your icons in there, screen layouts, and so on. So when you build one of these for the Mac, well, what do you have to do? Well, you're going to provide a few things. You're going to provide your jar files, all the stuff that goes into your application. Use whatever tool you want, Eclipse, NetBeans, I don't care. We don't care. Just make it into an executable with a defined main. And a cool icon. If you have those two things, you're ready to go. You're going to need some metadata, the information to put in that metadata. We'll talk a little bit more of that in the next session. But we're going to generate that for you. We're going to generate that metadata. We've got this launcher stub that's pretty generic and knows how to start up the VM. And as you can see, the runtime is included inside your bundle. This is actually something that we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a later slide, but this is something new that if you're used to how apps are built for Java on the Mac, that's actually new. You can actually include a specific JRE that you want in your application. And we'll get to why that's important here in a little bit. So how do you build one of these things? Well, we've got JavaFX Packager, which is a standard tool that comes with the JDK now. We've got App Bundler, which is a open source project I'll talk about in just a moment. And we got some ANT tasks that are part of the JavaFX that you can use if ANT is a part of your build system. So FX Packager comes with the JDK. It was originally written as a nice solution for wrapping up your code for a web start or an applet. Basically, you would tell it, okay, here's my applet code or here's my main, and it would generate HTML and the JNLP for you. And if you've ever done web start deployment or development, you know that hand coding JNLP is a pain in the neck and something we really don't want to be doing. It was originally geared towards JavaFX, because one nice thing about FX is that there isn't a huge distinction between an applet and an application. It's all a matter of how you deploy it. Well, FX Packager now, in later releases, now also generates these native apps for you. It's basically another thing that gets generated as part of your build process. A new thing coming is that currently it only handles JavaFX, but in an upcoming release, hopefully very soon. You can also work with Swing if you're not ready to adopt FX. But your existing Swing or even non-GUI apps can be packaged up with FX Packager. It works as a standalone tool. It's also an Ant library, but FX Packager basically uses that Ant library in the background to do its work. Okay, what's App Bundler? I'm going to mention that for completeness. App Bundler is basically the open source foundation on which we build FX Packager. And it's open source in java.net. Right now, all it can do is build native apps for OS 10 on OS 10 only, whereas FX Packager can generate a Mac format .app. It can also do EXEs and MSIs on Windows as well. I believe it supports a couple of Linux flavors as well. App Bundler is an Ant library. Does not support FX. That's the main thing, the main addition that we put into FX Packager. But because it's open, we're happy to take some contributions. And I'll have a link to the project at the end of this talk if you want to look into that. But the other thing you can do is you can take a look at the native code that actually launches the VM, and so you can understand what's going on. So I'm going to show you a very quick demonstration of FX Packager. And what I've got over here is a pretty bare bones Hello World app. So I think it just shows a window. And we got a manifest so we can turn it into a jar. And the script is pretty simple here. Can you see that? Or should I try to make it a little bit bigger? It's not terribly important for this particular demo. But basically, we have, right here, we have the FX Packager command and a big pile of arguments to pass to it. And one of these is the stash native, and that is what's going to generate the .app for us. It'll also give us a disk image. So I'll go over here, and we'll actually do it. Okay, as you can see, it's cranking away in the background there. We had a jar file in the class, the raw class files that got turned into the jar. Now we're creating our app bundle. And we are also creating a disk image. And you're going to see a flash here in just a moment as you see the disk image get created. So there's our .app, and we're turning it into a disk image with a nice, one drag install. Just sort of the new way to be doing things for apps on the Mac. So there we go. We've got our HTML and a web start. So this is an Apple-based deployment of this app. And here are my bundles. I've got my .app, and I've got a disk image with that .app. So with one command, I've got 3 deployment choices right there. As you can see, it shows up here in the doc with the right name and everything. So, to the user, this is just yet another Mac app that they run every day. Sure. And show package contents here. So there's my jar file. There's the metadata we made. There's a little stub that's the actual native code that basically it's JNI that starts the VM and sends your main application, your main class as the startup. Plugins, it has the JDK. It's got a it says JDK because that's what we're running against. I don't show it here for simplicity, but a feature of FX Packager in coming up is that you'll be able to pick any JRE that you want, not just the one that you're running with. So if you want to tie to a JRE, you can do that. But inside this is the absolute bare minimum to run a VM. So there's no command line tools, there's no deploy bits, there's no, none of the jars for building FX and anything, but the absolute minimum you need to run an app, which is the dilibs and the jars. And last of all is the resources. We don't have any localization here, but just a basic ICNS. And this comes in at 149 meg. Part of that is because in this version of the VM, FX builds both 32 and 64-bit, and it doesn't need to. So that'll cut some heft out of it as well. What's that? JRE only, yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So a JDK has a JRE inside of it. We just don't copy in the JDK bits.
So does that mean that app will run on a machine whether it has Java installed on it or not?
Correct. Yeah. That's the big benefit of doing it this way. So now I don't have to ask the user to install a JRE just to get their app to run. Okay, one more question. I'm going to keep going.
Yep. You have the limitation on only one JRE installed, but I assume if you use the FX Packager, you can package up the JRE of your choice.
Yep. And it will not be effective when the user updates the system JRE. All right, so let's go into the Java mailbag for some questions that we get asked now with this transition. And a common question we get is, well, I've installed the JRE, but I run, I don't know, NetBeans, or not NetBeans, but like IDEA, Eclipse, something like that, and ask me to install Java. What's going on? Well, remember what I said before, that your applications built with Apple's tools cannot use the Java 7 JRE. And as of this point, of course, nobody's had a chance to do that. So all current tools are currently going to want to pull in Java 6. Now, Eclipse, any ID that you want, can use the JDK. So you can install the JDK and tell your IDE, hey, target Java 7 for me. Use its compiler and so on. But to run it right now, it still has to use Java 6 until the IDE developers and other apps have a chance to get around to bundling or adopting native apps, the new native app support. You must repackage your app. We would prefer that you bundle the JRE. For a long time, I think we were saying that you have to do this. We're not going to support anything else. There was a significant pushback, and I think rightly so, that basically says that that's not really realistic. If I have a small app, I incur a pretty huge overhead hit just to deploy an application. So the launcher stub will look in the system JRE location, and we'll use that if you didn't bundle JRE for yourself. So you have an option to not do that when you package, but the launcher sub that we have knows to look in, look inside the bundle for JRE. If you don't find one, look in the system one in library internet plugins. If we don't find one there, tell the user now you got to go get Java. And we have a link to java.com for when that happens. You'll notice I see you have this green arrow again, not acceptable for the OS X App Store. Bundled apps, native packaging and bundling a JRE inside the app is what you must do if you want to put something in the OS X App Store. That's what we're going to talk about in depth in our next talk, but that was actually the driving impetus for improving the native application support. is that in the OS X App Store, and presumably other app stores that like the Windows 8 store or whatever other third-party stores we can think of, that relying on a third-party download is not going to be allowed. So you hear, well, you can't put Java apps in the OS X App Store. Well, that's not true. What you cannot do is put an app that relies on the user to install Java 6, which is a third-party install. So that's not allowed, but you are allowed to include a Java runtime in your app. And we've actually done that. For reasons I won't get into, it was put in. I had to take it out right away, but we will get it back there. But it had nothing to do with the fact that it was Java. So you can do this. So sort of a summary here of, back up here. So this chart, this table here is sort of designed to, give you one quick look at your possibilities for deployment and what it's going to use when you do that. So if you use scripts or your own custom launcher, it is possible to put a shell script in an application and have it run that way. In that case, we don't know what you're going to end up using. If you're going to use your own JRE or under JDK, I say please don't do this. This is relying on a JDK to be there for your application to run. We really don't want that. The next step up, and the other thing too is that this is sort of an evolutionary chart, if you will. The next step up was the Apple launcher, which is basically Java 6 based tools. It will not use the JDK, or it will not use the JRE, but it will use a JDK, in specifically Apple's JDK for JDK 6. Your next choice, which is better than the previous two, is use the Oracle launcher and bundling tools with no bundle JRE. So it will use a JRE, it will use the system JRE, it will not use the JDK. And which JRE will we use? Well, we'll use the system one if it's installed. And finally, your best choice would be the Oracle launcher with the bundle JRE, which will not use the system JRE or the JDK. It's going to use the one that you include. So, hopefully you can refer to this when somebody asks you, like, well, what are we going to do for deployment on the Mac? And then you can, hang up this slide and say, put a big circle around the bottom one and say, well, we're going to try to do this one. And hopefully help you keep the options straight in your head too when you leave here today and you go back and try to actually do this. So some more questions, and these two are related, so I put them in the same slide. So I installed the JRE. So why do I still see Java 6 when I type Java-version? Or something related, very similar. I installed the JDK for Java 7, but Java-versions gave me something else. Do I have to set Java home? Well, Java home and setting a path is a Windowsism, basically. And so the short answer is no, you don't have to set Java home. For the first one, well, remember what I said. I said when you install the JRE, it is not available from the command line. You have to install the JDK to see Java 7 on the command line. Now this chart is designed to help reinforce what we've been saying here, is that if you want to do something on the command line, then you need to be using either you need to be using a Java 7 JDK. If you want to do anything else, you should be relying on the JRE or having your users rely on the JRE. And it sounds like I'm repeating myself, and I am, but this is fundamentally different than what you've been used to at this point from Apple. So I'm trying to drive it home, and hopefully you will repeat it as a mantra when you start doing your own development. So, you do not have to set Java home. You can set it. There are some tools that like Ant, for example, that want it. There is a command line item called user libexec /user/libexec /java_home that will tell you what the current default version of Java is. They'll also tell you what versions of Java are available to you. So if you haven't tried that out before, give it a try and play around with it. So related to all that, we got this thing Java preferences.app. It's an applications utilities. And as I mentioned, this controls which JDK what the plugin was using. Control the JDK search order. It also governs the JDK that's in use by the command line tools. So if you run that, you know that the JDK at the top of the list is what you get when you type Java-version, Java C, and so forth. Well, in an upcoming version update from Apple, which I hope will be within the next month or two, but I can't promise that, that app is going away completely. From now on, the latest JDK installed will always be used by default. If you want to use an older JDK, you can set up Java Home, use Java Home to pick another version if that's important for your needs. But don't rely on Java preferences.app being there. And instead, for everything that you would have done in there, you would go to the control system preferences and run the Java control panel from there. That's a big thing, because a common question I get is, well, I installed it, and I installed Java 7, but how do I do all these things that I could do in Java 6? It's like, well, we're making a cutover. And the day is coming when you will not be able to run Java 6 for applets or web start at all. So try to internalize this and start planning ahead, because it's going to happen within the next year. So, to sum up here, 7 really is a new beginning for Java. I mean, now that Oracle's taken it over, we're doing some things differently than Apple did, mainly for consistency, but mainly because we're not part of the OS anymore. Java is its own third-party install now, and that requires some changes. If you're into applets and WebStart for your deployment needs, there are a lot of cool things that you can do now that we're based on Java 7 and sharing a lot more code than we did in the past. There are lots of sessions. There are other sessions this week, and I'll have links to them, but you want to learn about that. Don't rely on the mixed JDK, JRE behavior of Apple 6. There is a distinct split now of a JDK and a JRE. And try to remember JDK for developers, JRE for end users. That's true on all platforms, but it's really important now on the Mac. And finally, hopefully you'll start taking the time to repackage whatever you've been distributing for Java 7 with our new bundling tools. And some resources real quick. We got one more talk this afternoon about deployment on macOS 10. We'll take a break and come back in an hour, and I'll go more in depth on native applications. We have an in-depth talk on Java deployment this Thursday. And fortunately, they're all in the same room. Just have to remember the times. It's kind of hard to find times and sessions this year. And finally, that's where you go if you want to learn about App Bundler, which is the open source part of FX Packager. So I will leave that slide there, and we'll just go to Q&A. We'll start right here.
The App Bundler takes care of Swing and non-FX.
So today, App Bundler will take care of non-FX. And FX Packager is it's part of what we ship now, but it can only handle FX and it can't do native apps. So unfortunately, what I've been talking to you about for FX Packager is not in what we ship right now. It will come very soon, we hope. We'll start right here.
Do you have any plans to release a Gradle plugin to help implement the packager with Gradle?
I'm going to have to answer that later because I don't know what the first thing is that you're talking about, Gradle. But it's something we can talk about later. Look into it. Over here.
So, is it possible to, or will it be possible to run the packager on bundle and this image, and why not?
So to create the .app, you do not need, you can do that on any platform because it's just assembling a bunch of files together. And it is possible to do, to basically turn that into a zip and then put it wherever. You can't make a DMG on any other platform other than the Mac, at least not that I'm aware of. Our goal is to be able to build from any platform for any platform. So in theory, you should be able to be on the Mac and build for Windows, Linux, Mac all at one time. Or if you're on Linux, build for Linux, Mac, Windows all at one time. That may be an unrealistic goal. We don't know yet. But that's what we want to try to do.
To create a DMG, you still use Apple?
Yeah. Right. Yes, if you want to build a DMG, for example, you have to have Apple's tools to do it. Right there.
Yeah, if I install a pre-release JDK8, are you going to swap out my JRE with the JRE8 or leave it at 7? And how do I get back?
Okay, so yes, it will swap out the JRE. When you want to go back, you just go into Library Internet Plugins, delete the applet, Java applet plugin.plugin, and reinstall the old one. You'll be prompted to update it, but you don't have to accept the update. Right here.
Do you have plans to support client properties like in any J component? With the Apple implementation, it was really nice to put client properties, and as far as I understand, the Oracle inherits this part of the code from Apple.
So the specifics on that, you're going to have to talk to the 2D and swing teams, but most of them, yes. I believe we do already.
They don't work now.
Okay.
None of them.
Some do, some don't. I can't tell you right now which do and don't. I know that some do. But I would, there's a meet the swing team tomorrow afternoon. You can bring it up then. And back?
You may have answered this before, but I didn't really get it. From your demo, it looked like the FX builder didn't build an app bundle. In which situation would you still use the app bundler rather than the FX bundler?
So today, you would use App Bundler if you're still targeting AWT and Swing. If you're targeting Java FX, then you what I actually showed you was not yet released, and is going to come hopefully very soon. But right now, your best choice would be App Bundler. Right and verify.
I use a tool that I downloaded from the source, and it's a key tool GUI.
Okay.
And that comes as a jar file and a script that has path information. Can that be used? Can that, even though it's already a jar file, can that be converted to an app?
Yeah, as long as the jar has like if you would do like java-jar and then the jar file, yeah, you can easily turn that into a .app. And let's see, right behind you.
Anybody in the open source community written a Maven plugin for App Bundler or?
Actually, we got a contribution to make a Maven plugin out of App Bundler, and I forget where that is. Because it was within the last week or two that we got the actual contribution. But if it hasn't happened yet, it will be soon. Right there.
So, do you have access to have a complete native look? For example, macOS 10.7 added the little arrow in the upper corner to be able to go full screen. Can you integrate that and check that and use it?
As I recall, Java FX can handle full screen windows. I don't know that Swing. I don't know that an AWT Swing window can do that. I don't know that offhand.
But you're attempting to make the full feature set available so that a user wouldn't know it's a Java application.
Well, that's true, yeah. But I think you're going to see those advancements in FX, Java FX. you'll be more likely to see those in JavaFX. Right here?
Just to follow up that question, there's a whole lot of other native tweaks that we used to have, like menus, table style,
Right.
drag and drop and file, dialogues. Are all of those, is Oracle starting to support actually native looking applications?
That is a tough question, actually.
What was the question?
Yeah, is Oracle's does Oracle intend to support more native-looking applications? Is that?
Yeah, well,
I can use the
realistically,
Apple implementation.
yeah.
Yeah. So how much native integration are we going to see? Right. So okay. Here's what I do know is going on: is that we are trying to make FX more. How should I say this? Right now, we've sort of got this bolted-on thing for getting at things like the Apple menu and things like that. We are working on a cleaner API in FX, so it'll just be part of the platform. You won't have to do special casing per platform. Also, for things like the system menu bar, that's also in FX as well. As far as AWT and Swing, there's not going to be a ton of new innovation there, but I think we're going to try to do the best we can to carry over what we got from Apple. As far as like specific things you want to see, I mean, the standard thing I can say is file bugs, and just make sure that I had this thing in Apple in JRE 6, where to go in JDK 7. That's the best thing I can suggest. All the way in the back. Oh, well, that's you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you just answered it, but I have an app that was written using Java and Java FX. And right now it opens on both the Mac and PC laptops and desktops. So I'm going to have that bundled so I can upload it to the Mac App Store. I guess that'll only be, can be run on desktop.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in getting my app made so it'll run on both the, this quote-unquote PC mobiles as well as the Mac mobiles, including the iPad. Can I use Java to accomplish that with mobiles, both platforms, or do I need Coca-Cola?
So it's 2 o'clock. You win the pool.
Or do I need Coca-Cola or C++ to
If the answer today that I'm supposed to tell you is that if you want to do Java on iOS, ADF Mobile was released today with support for deploying to iOS. For FX on mobile, Oracle continues to watch the market and will release future implementations as they see fit.
That's such a nice answer.
So really, I can look for somebody to code it using Coca-Cola or C++.
The only way to deploy on iOS right now is Objective-C. The only way to deploy to ship an application for iOS is via Objective-C. Well, okay, there are no Java-based FX solutions right now for iOS. That's probably the better way to say it. Because you can do other things in Objective-C, but you can't do FX right now. Mm-hmm. Right here.
It's probably a simple question. I was playing around with the FX bundler while you were talking, and it bundles my class and defines them, but I'm referring to like extending swing worker, and it can't find that in the class path that I'm giving it. So how do you link it to the Java classes?
Okay. Actually, the main guy who works on FX Packager walked in about 10 minutes into the talk. So he would be the perfect person to ask specifically about that. It is possible to put in third-party jars as opposed to just what you wrote and NetBeans produced. I believe you have to go into the Ant task, use the Ant task version of FX Packager to do that because you're pulling in additional jars. I don't know how to do that off the top of my head, but I think we can figure it out for you. It is possible to do it. I can't tell you right now exactly how to do it. Okay, 2 more. Right.
I just wanted to clarify something you said earlier. You said that the Java FX packager you demonstrated is not available yet.
Not yet. Well, okay. It is available, but it can't produce native bundles yet. So the FX packager we have right now will produce WebStart and Applet deployment for you. But unfortunately not yet with the native app. Native.
Be released shortly?
Can't give you a date, but soon.
Like months, not years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, 1 more.
You mentioned, I think you said ADF mobile.
Yes.
Supporting iOS. I'm not familiar with it. Is that the acronym for
ADF. Oracle Application Development Framework, I think is the full name of it.
And it, you can start with Java and just iOS.
Yes.
Translated to Objective-C or something?
So there's a very small profile VM that is like an embedded scale VM with a very small footprint. And that's probably all I want to say about it right now. Okay, thanks very much. And hopefully you'll come back in an hour and see our next session on building native apps in detail.